Hi, I'm Frankie, and in this video, I'll share how you can create your first Azure AI Search service. So I'm in a new resource group, and I'll go to create my first resource within this resource group. I'll search AI Search. I'll find Azure AI Search, start creating now. Got your basic subscription, resource group, which I already have. I'll call this Search AIS, East US 2, Demo, AI Search. I'll make it East US. Now, when it comes to pricing tiers within Azure AI Search, I'll share a bit about this. There's a whole bunch of different SKUs you can look at, and the offerings, they go from small to high. To describe a little bit how these things work, indexes are the actual it's the actual storage of where your data is actually living. So the way your index actually is going to hold all the data, it's within what's called the index. So like a database has a structured database with rows and columns, your index is in the search world. When it comes to search engines, it's the actual database that's holding all of the data so that it's easily and quickly accessible. An indexer is what's used so that you can actually create that index. So you'll ingest data and actually build an index using the indexer to be able to map data the proper way from your data source. Your vector quota is how much data you can store in terms of vectors. You might also hear the term embedding, which is referred to as a vector in the AI world. But an embedding is it's another way of saying vector with a slightly different concept. So an embedding or vector quota is per partition what's listed here. This total storage is everything that you can have for that index. So this includes your vector quota. So if I were to choose standard, which is what I will choose here, I can have 35 gigabytes per partition or 160 gigabytes for total storage. So 35 gigabytes of that total storage can be vector quota. Doesn't have to be, but I can't have more than 35 gigabytes of vector storage within this unless I up my partitions. I'll move these a little bit so you can see there's search units. Search units is basically a form of measurement that Microsoft uses to be able to quote the usage of the Azure AI Search resource. There's a lot of compute and infrastructure behind the scenes of what goes down to make this work. So a search unit is the maximum amount of this infrastructure and compute that they have put together that can be available depending on the tier you have. So for the free tier, your search unit is always a product of your replicas, your number of replicas, multiplied by your number of partitions. So if you were to have the maximum amount of search units you could have is 9 if you have 3 replicas, 3 partitions, 3 times 3 is 9. But just so you know, search units, you could have 36 in the standard, and while you could have 12 replicas, or you could have 12 partitions, you certainly can't have all 12 for replicas and all 12 partitions, because that's 144 search units, not 36. So you would need to play around with how much you have of each if you wanted to maximize your search units depending on your other tiers. Things to keep in mind. This also does get pretty expensive. So as you'll see when we select an option, that one search unit, this is the cost. So if you increase to multiple search units, you'll see the cost go up, and you'll see that in just a second. So I am going to choose the standard tier here, because I am going to get rid of this later. For the compute type, you do have the option of choosing confidential computing. For those of you who don't know what confidential computing is that in general, a lot of times data is encrypted at rest when it's sitting in a database. It's encrypted in transit when it's going over a network. but when it's executing compute or code, when it's processing is another term, it's technically being decrypted, read, processed, and then encrypted again when it's placed somewhere. If there are people or businesses in a regulatory position where you need to have very safe and secure processing requirements, meaning something that has logic executing on it and needs to also be encrypted, you might need confidential computing, but most people don't. So next we'll go to scale. So scaling, this section is all about how many replicas or partitions do you need. I would say generally you're always going to start with just one. Don't worry about having more replicas. In a replica is just a copy of your index. So if you have one index that can service a bunch of requests and responses, and you find that it starts to go slow in terms of its response time, you might need to up the replicas so that you have more concurrent request responses that you can make. So only need to increase your replicas once you have a large amount of requests. Now, if you are a big business or an enterprise, you might know that you need more replicas from the very beginning, but you will first want to establish a baseline to know how many requests and response you might have with one replica when you're developing your solution, and then only add replicas as you need once you know your baseline, depending on your solution. There are some benefits to starting off in terms of SLAs with multiple replicas as well, which you can see here and here. Partitions is just an additional set of compute and also storage that you can add to your AI search resource, as this is helpful if you have a large index that will go over the storage for a single partition, where you'll need multiple partitions to cover that entire index. This also helps with some of the compute that can help increase the speed and efficiency of your indexing. So when documents are coming into your data source and they need to be indexed to add to your index from your indexer, having more partitions gives you more compute to make that process go faster as well. Networking, there's some basic networking you can have if you want this to be public or if you want to set up a private endpoint. Then there's tags, then you can review and create, which I will do. My resource is created, I'll go to it. And on this overview page, some things to point out is now this is where you'd start adding information if you wanted to create your first index. So I have the option to create an index manually in the Azure portal, where I could start adding fields and I can decide what their field attributes are. In a future video, I'll go over how these specific fields work when it comes to querying. You can import data using two different types of import wizards right now. This is the old form of importing data, but there is a new form, which is labeled new. You'll choose your data source, follow the wizard to create your indexer, maybe your skill set, that type of thing. Your Search Explorer takes you straight to where you can start querying on indexes that you have. And then you'll see some of the basic information. Down here, you'll get a little bit of this, the basic steps to this import is just taking you the first import data. If you want to view some of the data that you already have, some metrics, you can check out some properties that you have once you have indexes in here to see what is available to you. What is your quota? How much of your vector quota have you used? How much of your total quota for the partitions and total resources that are available? You want to jump to your API keys, see your connectivity, all that stuff. The usage, you can also see with these charts, make it easier if you're a visual learner. Monitoring to see how well your AI search is being used, how fast it is, how many queries per second. This is helpful to help you determine, one, the performance, two, do you need to add replicas or partitions, things like that. You'll be living in the search management section quite a bit using Azure AI Search. The indexes are where you'll actually have and find your indexes that are available in this AI search resource. The indexers are the tools that map your indexes from data sources and skill sets to create that index. Your data sources are where the original data is stored that's being indexed into your index. An alias is a way so that you can map to an index without having to change underlying code. So if you're using a software development kit, an SDK to make calls to your AI search resource, you might have an alias that maps to a index, but could also then change the underlying index so that if you map to an alias, you can switch the index that that alias is mapping to so that it's easy to make changes from one index to another and without any underlying code needing to change. So that way you don't need to hard code a specific index. Even with environment variables, you can just map to an alias, and then in your AI search resource, you can change the index that an alias is mapped to without affecting an application that's using that alias. Skill sets are what are necessary to help enrich or add enhancements to the mapping of data from a data source to your index. It's also what's used to create the embeddings for vectors in your index. Debug sessions are what you'll use if you're trying to figure out, why an indexer is not working. Things are breaking in the way that the mapping is working, in the way that the indexing is happening. You can use debug sessions as a form of trying to understand what's wrong and trying to fix what's going on. The last couple sections that you'll probably use quite a bit are the keys section and also the scaling section. If you want to scale or take a look at your keys for using your Azure AI Search. Everything else is pretty self-explanatory, but that is Azure AI Search in a nutshell. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. I answer every question to help as many people as I can. If this video was helpful for you, I'd appreciate if you liked the video and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more content like this. As always, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.